Okay, so the last video was focusing on weathering. So now let's talk about the next process, which is called erosion. What is erosion? It is the movement of sediment. Remember, sediment is pieces of rock. Notice that there is a dump truck. What does a dump truck do? It moves things from one location to another by water, ice, wind, or waves. Okay, so erosion is the movement of sediment from one location to another by water, ice, wind, or waves. Alright, so let's break it down and let's look to see what each of those, or how each of those participates or is a part of the process of erosion. So running water, so we could think of rivers carry sediments. Okay, so rivers carry sediments. That's the most important part right there. Okay, so let's highlight that part, or I will highlight it so that you know that that's the most important part about running water. Okay, so waves. What do waves do? Why are they important? Alright, so powerful waves they pick up and move sediments from the shoreline. Okay, so here's our water. Our wave comes in, it grabs the sand and brings it back out. Okay, so it's important to think about that. Water is moving these sediments. Okay, water is moving the sediments. So now let's talk about ice. We in Florida don't know too much about ice, but we do know that it does affect other areas. So let's look at how that could happen. So glaciers, which are huge pieces of ice, alright, they pick up sediments and carry them. Okay, so glaciers pick up sediments and carry them. So as they move, they take the glaciers with them. They take the rocks with them. So the glaciers move very slowly. So as they're gripping, as they move, they're picking up sediments and they're carrying them. So remember, erosion is the movement of sediment. So weathering breaks it down into pieces and erosion actually moves it. It's easier to move something if it's in pieces. So that's where we see the word sediments a lot. Sediments. Okay, so remember, sediments are pieces of rock. So what process happened before that? Weathering. Weathering happened before that. So with wind, not right in yellow. Okay, so wind picks up sediments. Here's that key word again. Okay, so we know sediments are pieces of rock and can move them great distances. So from where the wind picks it up, the rocks can move far away from their original location. So once again, here's the key word, sediment. So we know that weathering happened before this happened because there were sediments that were moved. So erosion moves the rock, moves the sediment. All right, so what are some features that are formed by erosion? Like, so what are some landforms? All right, so we have a valley, or a canyon, or a gully. All right, so we have something that's called a sea stack. So think of rocks that are stacked up on top of each other. All right. Think about this picture right here, okay? Think about how it's not completely, but then you can see all these layers. That means that rock has been moved and then it's just sitting there. Okay, so there's some different things. A mesa. There's something called a horn. These are just different names of landforms. So let's talk about something that's important. How does this actually affect people? Okay, so soil erosion impacts farmers. So cliffside homes, so people who live by the bay, all right, if that cliff were to move and erode away, their home can be ruined. All right, roads wash away. All right, and that's when we start talking about sinkholes, and they damage homes and roads. All right, so let's move down and let's talk about this last process. This last process, so we start with weathering. It breaks the rock down into pieces. Then erosion's going to pick it up and move it. And so then deposition, all right, occurs when sediments, remember sediments are pieces of rock, okay, when sediments are dropped in a new location. And they build up, they pile up. Okay, so deposition is when sediments are dropped in a new location and they build up. Okay, so features that are formed by deposition. So what are some things? So the beach is actually formed because, or you can look at the sandbar, so where the sand piles up, all right, so sand dunes, that's deposition. Okay, the sand was carried by the water and then it sits there and it piles up. So that's deposition. Okay, so explain how weathering, erosion, and deposition are related. So how are all three processes related? All right, so weathering breaks down rock, creating sediment. All right. Oh. That are moved by erosion and dropped in a new location by deposition. Okay, So let's review that. I'm so sorry that the paper moved. All right, so explain how weathering, erosion, and deposition are related. Okay, so weathering breaks down the rock, creating sediment. Remember, that's our key word. We see it a lot. Sediments are pieces of rock. They're moved by erosion, and then they're dropped in a new location by deposition. So it's kind of a process. So then once those new rocks are deposited, they pile up, then the process starts over. They can be moved again by erosion, so then they're put in a new location. They can get broken down even smaller, and then that's when next we talk about the rock cycle and how all those different kinds of rocks are made. So after you have done the weathering video and this video, I want you to go through and I want you to look at this review sheet. And I want you to write down all the things you know and you remember about weathering, and write down what you remember about erosion and deposition, okay? And this should be in your notebook.